Welcome to Get Wisdom Live with Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. What if God was also a co-host? What if the historically rare ability to question God directly and get profound answers back has been rediscovered? What would God say to today's sophisticated but deeply troubled world? Get Wisdom Live is here to share those answers with you. Here is Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. Welcome to another episode of Get Wisdom Live. I'm Brian Kelly, along with Get Wisdom founder and director, Carl Mollison. This week, Creator explains the origins and true significance of superstitions. You know, Carl, if we're lucky, knock on wood, we're going to have a good show today. I just hope I didn't jinx us by saying that, though.
Well, jinxes are alive and well in many people's minds, and there is such a thing as hexing, and it is quite real. It's called a psychic attack, to be more precise about it. I never thought I would be defending superstition as having something important to say, but yet here we are, and it will be talked about continually as we go through today's program. This was surprising to me, and just asking some simple questions about common superstitions and getting Creator's perspective about why we believe this, and how did this get going, and why did that happen? There's
Yeah,
a new story here to share.
indeed. And the channelings truly were amazing, so we'll get right into them. You asked Creator, one of the most common everyday superstitions is the idea of beginner's luck. Is there such a thing? There is an article by columnist Stephanie Pappas on NBCNews.com titled 13 Common But Silly Superstitions to Savor. In it, Pappas writes about beginner's luck. Quote, like many superstitions, a belief in beginner's luck arises because of confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is a psychological phenomenon in which people are more likely to remember events that fit their worldview. If you believe you're going to win because you're a beginner, you're more likely to remember all the times you were right and forget the times you ended up in last place. Unquote. What is Creator's perspective?
All right, and this is the answer that I channeled from Creator of all that is. This is a common blending of scientific theory and observational descriptions of human behavior and making an attempt to explain one with the other. In actuality, these are two separate phenomena, but can merge in certain circumstances. So it does not hold that because confirmation bias can be demonstrated to occur based on statistically analyzed data, that does not mean it gives rise to superstition necessarily, even though it is creating false assumptions. When people link an experience, like doing better when first trying something new, and then having a decline in performance, to make the assumption luck is somehow a factor that helps a beginner, but then is somehow mysteriously unavailable or actively withdrawn to thwart them in repeating a prior good performance, is a leap of logic beyond reason and dives into magical thinking based on no objective reality whatsoever. This superstition of beginner's luck is actually based on a differing reality than science recognizes, and that is that humanity is under subjugation. It is being actively suppressed to dim people down, dumb them down, and interfere, even in daily activities of a mundane sort, simply as a kind of amusement and recreation for powerful beings who are running things from behind the scenes. We understand full well that a critic could have a field day with this answer, seeing this as yet another psychological aberration on the part of your channel here, simply tapping into some subconscious recesses, having a paranoid nature, causing him to elaborate a conspiracy theory about boogeymen or an evil satanic force, perhaps, but assuming it rests solely within his psyche as a self created source of negativity with no basis in reality. The literal truth is Many times, people do well on their first foray because no one is watching, and they simply can perform well at the outset. But when they return to repeat the performance, there may be something actively wanting to manipulate them, to trip them up, and going out of its way to make that happen. This, of course, would not be perceived consciously by the individual and thus cannot be reckoned with, understood, or a new theory formulated to factor in outside forces being brought to bear to influence a person. That is the true origin of this superstition. Many times the darkness will choose to wait until someone has achieved something in order to take it away and heighten the loss and its consequences from that failure. They love to pull the rug out from under the successful. It is much more thrilling for them to take down the mighty than to attack a weakling barely getting started. This fits perfectly, having many people with a personal history of initial accomplishment, but then waning capability, causing them to perhaps give up and assume they are no good at something when, in fact, the opposite is the case. But the rewards are being denied them through a manipulation to make them fail. There is a psychological consequence of failure, especially with a prior record of success, because that will heighten the pain and perceived inadequacy and not being consistent and reliable in one's abilities. That self doubt can grow and create an attitude of negativity that will undermine the self and decrease the likelihood of success overall. But that is more likely to happen when there is an active manipulation going on, creating a painful reversal of fortune. If a person does have the talent to do something, and that is demonstrated at the outset when they first try something out, there is no good reason for them not to build on that happy circumstance with continued improvement and continued refinement of their skill and knowledge that is likely owing to inner talent. So the issue is not that they are simply lucky and getting away with something not deserved. For them to start failing takes some doing in actuality and would not likely happen on its own. To the extent superstitions are believed, they will infect others with illogical notions. So it is certainly, of course, possible that many people will do well at something at first, but then struggle to match their prior performance and might think themselves or be told they did well because it was only beginner's luck. And that acts as a kind of cursing, and if believed, can hold power and make a person withdraw from the contest, which is only an ability to overcome the self and its faulty notions.
The surprising thing here is what Crater says that, the interlopers are interfering even in mundane manners. And what could be more mundane than tripping somebody up who's essentially a raw beginner? They might come into the contest with some talent, even from past lives, some innate talent, but they're still just getting started. And to have, masters of time and space, that have Star Trek level technology, take an interest in that, and then trip you up like an adolescent on a bully on a school play yard. That's hard for people to wrap their head around, Carl.
Well, this is wildly improbable, and I totally get it. I would never have believed the world could operate this way because it's hidden from view. It's not visible. It's an orchestration from behind the scenes done through various means of energy and manipulation through psychic extraterrestrials that are telepathic and that can manipulate a deep part of the mind that's cordoned off from conscious awareness and make people corrupted in a way to be their own worst enemy in a sense through creating inner conflict and so on. And everyone who's participated in some sort of contest, like an athletic event or even an intellectual arena where they're kind of put in the spotlight and they have to perform. They have to recite a lengthy poem or something that they've memorized and all those things you do in school. Everyone knows that anxiety can get in your way.
Sure.
So all it takes is a little bit of intervention to throw you off stride, and that can make all the difference in a heated contest with rivals seeking the the title of winner.
Yeah. I can think back on my own life, Carl, where I had what I thought was beginner's luck and then tried to take the next step and then would fall flat on my face. Like for instance, I always fancied myself a pretty decent baseball player because I actually had once a season as a little leaguer that was where I was really good. You know, I hit home runs, I nailed everything on the field. I was considered one of the top players on the team. And then a few years passed, and I went to try out one day for the high school baseball team, and everything went wrong. I mean, everything. And I actually took myself out of the equation rather than proceed because it was just so bad. There was no point in even talking to the coaches about it. But I think back on that now, and it's like I didn't obviously have the light worker healing protocol back then, you know. And it's like, was I interfered with? It's a good question.
Yes. Well, we're all interfered with in many ways we don't realize. So, in a sense, this isn't surprising um, in that big picture sense. But the fact that this is behind a superstition that's really ancient is very telling,
Yeah,
because this speaks to this issue, not only present, but something that's been ever present. And
yeah,
that's quite jarring. And that makes this even more serious.
indeed. U.S. creator, a rabbit's foot will bring you luck. Pappas writes, talismans and amulets are a time honored way of fending off evil. Consider the crosses and garlic that are supposed to keep vampires at bay. Rabbit feet as talismans may hark back to early Celtic tribes in Britain. They may also arise from hoodoo, a form of African American folk magic, and superstition that blends Native American, European, and African tradition. Unquote. Can Creator tell us how this superstition came about, this rabbit's foot bringing good luck, and if there is any actual reality to it?
All right. This is what Creator says. While having a presumed lucky rabbit's foot is quite widespread in some areas of the world, there are many examples of talismans arising in cultures here, there, and everywhere. This is also an example of innate human wisdom. There is a need for protection from things unseen. And in cultures where this is not addressed directly and specifically with tools that work, a do it yourself approach that creates a kind of superstition will fill the gap. Such notions will be comforting to the owner of such talismans, and this has a benefit in raising their vibration and give them confidence of personal safety. This is the basis of all such good luck charms because people know bad things can happen and there is an intuitive awareness of the darkness. This might be consciously denied or suppressed or simply not thought about, depending on the background and cultural influences from the way they were raised. But intuitively, people will know something may be out to get them and will feel uneasy and seek ways to ensure stability and a safe harbor. A talisman becomes a portable protector in the mind of the holder, and people will cling to this even though its effectiveness cannot be proven. So rather than the use of such objects being proof of humans being illogical and vulnerable to superstitious nonsense, it is actually a demonstration of intelligence and intuitive reach in knowing there is more in the world than what can be seen with the eye. This does not mean that obtaining a rabbit's foot is the answer for evil. And that is the basic problem here, that superstition is not truly an answer for anything, but a diagnostic indicator of a problem needing to be addressed. A rabbit's foot will not help you outrun the darkness.
Ugh, darn. That was. I mean, I expected that answer, but some people would be disappointed in hearing that. But no, this is very very revealing, and I was reminded that probably somebody once said that professional sports players in whatever sport you want, football, baseball, basketball, they're almost all superstitious. And they'll eat the same, like they eat the same meal or the same breakfast before a game and stuff. And it won't change anything if they ended up on a winning streak. So
Yes.
superstitions are alive and well. We may not talk about them much, but they're definitely going strong.
Well, this is building a stronger and stronger case as we go here, that there's a reason for superstitions, and it isn't that humans are ignorant and prone to illogical follies of all kinds. They're reacting to something that's real, and that's
Yeah.
that's the key. You skipped over one here, the one about walking under a ladder.
Oh, I did. Well, we'll do that right now. Scroll bar went a little fast. U.S. creator, another common superstition is don't walk under a ladder. Clearly, there are some practical reasons for not doing this, but Pappas writes about other historical beliefs surrounding this caveat. Quote, one theory holds that this superstition arises from a Christian belief in the Holy Trinity. Since a ladder leaning against a wall forms a triangle, breaking that triangle was blasphemous. Then again, another popular theory is that a fear of walking under a ladder has to do with this resemblance to a medieval gallows. Unquote. What can Creator tell us?
All right, creator says, here again, human behavior is given a prosaic explanation based on cultural phenomena as a ready explanation for something that is actually strange and improbable on its face. There are certainly potential risks if one walks under a ladder and bumps into it. That is simply common sense. But to do so carefully and still have something bad happen requires some external agent to set things in motion to have a physical consequence. Here again, there is a strange but logical mechanism behind the origin of this superstition. When people do things and take risks, it will often end badly because there are dark forces watching you. So, someone walking under a ladder creates a tempting target for mischief if there is a dark spirit seeing what is going on and wanting to have fun. Simply by distracting the mind of a person while taking a small risk of walking under a ladder to misguide their senses, causing them to bump into the ladder and get an accident going. Many auto accidents are caused by possessing spirits, distracting drivers within the mind, and that momentary inattention at just the right moment can end in tragedy if their car wanders over the center line or fails to react to brake lights on the car in front of them, and so on. So, this is not something esoteric and a remote possibility that people could experience what they feel is bad luck from going under a ladder. The object lesson from the existence of this superstition is that people are vulnerable to outside manipulation and need ways to keep that in check to safeguard their personal safety.
I was thinking this whole thing with the ladder. Obviously, we're being messed with, right? This is actually a form of direct gaslighting on the part of the interlopers, whether it's dark spirits or the ETs. And gaslighting is messing with you so that you have doubt, right? So that you wouldn't, you can walk under the ladder and you're not going to have a negative result every single time, but you'll end up having a negative result often enough to make you wonder, right? Is this a problem? And then it kind of nags at you and bothers you. And if enough people have that kind of experience, then there's the dawn of the superstition, right? So it's interesting what's going on here, Carl.
Well, and the superstition becomes a great cover story
Yeah.
because if people start having accidents and misfortune associated with certain situations, like not having a rabbit's foot when their
Right.
friend who does better, they can manipulate things to get everyone on board. So then they can wreak havoc and it'll be attributed to bad luck.
Yeah.
Not that something unseen is malevolent and carrying out something in some surreptitious fashion that is devastating but otherworldly in the sense it doesn't seem to make sense from what you know how things work.
Yeah. And of course, when something bad does happen to you, it's not always going to be a direct result of what you've done. For instance, like you walk under the ladder and you turn around, you look at your friend and say, "Hey, look at me. Everything's fine." And the next thing you know, you got a big pigeon poo dropping on your head. It comes out of nowhere, right? So, did you invite that? You say, "Well, I did by walking under the ladder," but not because you may have walked under the ladder and tripped on a crack, which would be maybe a different causation, so to speak. But things can just come out of the blue, which reinforces the idea that you're not in control and that this is something that you've invoked um, ignorantly, and you better pay attention next time.
Yes.
Be sure to check out getwisdom.com, and we'll invite you right now. We're going to, spoiler alert, there's an answer to all this dilemma, and it's the Lightworker Healing Protocol. So take the time right now during this break to go to getwisdom.com, getwisdom.com/LHP. Download the ebook describing the Lightworker Healing Protocol. You can learn to become a practitioner yourself, or you can hire a practitioner to take care of these needs and provide safety that will prevent you from having to rely on superstitions for it. So, words of the wise. You ask Creator, bad luck comes in threes, so they say.
You're
But then so
skipping
does
the
good
prior
luck.
question,
Yeah.
sir.
Oh,
There's one more question in that
oh, boy.
previous page.
You're right. I just all over the place.
You're an
I
eager
don't have my
beaver
lucky
today.
rabbit's foot with me, Carl.
Well, you have me here to correct you, so
There you go.
we're
I
good.
have my lucky Carl with me. Knock on wood. There we go. Pappas writes, according to folklore, breaking a mirror is a surefire way to doom yourself to 7 years of bad luck. The superstition seems to arise from the belief that mirrors don't just reflect your image, they hold bits of your soul. That belief led people in the old days of the American South to cover mirrors in a house when someone died, lest their soul be trapped. Unquote. What can Creator tell us about mirrors and the widespread belief in their hazards?
All right, Creator says this as well is an example of a disinformation campaign to make people fear a technological innovation so amazing it was disconcerting at first to people to see an exact reflection of themselves as though it were a replica. But why would this mean something bad or dangerous? When any time spent with a mirror and any comparison to natural phenomena, like seeing clouds reflected on the surface of a calm pond, knows that certain materials can reflect the image of something, and it is simply light bouncing off, seen by the eye. To develop a powerful superstition that a mirror might somehow capture your soul was started as a disinformation campaign by both dark spirits possessing people and extraterrestrial psychics, manipulating people from within their mind to make them fearful. Here again is another example of the interlopers wanting to spoil the party for you, so you cannot even enjoy something simple like a mirror that has many practical uses as well as entertainment value by turning it into something sinister and potentially holding power over you. This is displaying the mean spirited nature of the interlopers, and not that human beings themselves will always conjure up darkness to distort things and create fear.
It's an interesting thing. I may have to go look up the history of the mirror and see when it was actually invented. Like, I don't even know if the Romans had mirrors, for instance. But I do remember cartoons growing up, and there was I think a Bugs Bunny episode or something where the witch was saying, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" type deal. I think probably a nursery rhyme or story of that. And so that tells you right there that it's hundreds of years old anyway. It's not a new phenomenon. But mirrors back then would have been very rare and expensive, and certainly if you associate them with witches, well, there's part of your problem right there, Carl.
Yes, yes. Well, people are vulnerable, and that's one thing history shows us. And look around the world today at
Yeah,
how uneven things are, how much suffering there is, and all sorts of theories and would be explanations that none agree on universally.
right.
So this is a story that just continues.
And Mirrors have been used in magic, in sorcery, as well as scrying, which is the spiritual, seeing visions in a mirror. Nostradamus supposedly used a mirror, so to speak, to get his visions. So there's something there, but yes, the overall message is that this is manipulation, and you're owning a handheld mirror to comb your hair with is not going to be an issue. U.S. creator, bad luck comes in threes, but then so does good luck, as the hat trick in hockey celebrates. Pappas writes, remember confirmation bias? The belief that bad luck comes in threes is a classic example. A couple of things go wrong, and believers may start to look for the next bit of bad luck. A lost shoe might be forgotten one day, but then seen as the third in a series of bad breaks the next. Unquote. What is Creator's perspective on bad luck comes in threes?
Creator says, this is another example of science trying to weigh in about something it does not truly understand, and providing a hypothesis as a seeming explanation for an oddity of human behavior, that a cultural belief could become well entrenched about something that has no logical basis. So, oftentimes, whenever science is looking for something for which no explanation is known, it will be seen as illogical, and then science will come to the rescue with applied logic. Whether or not the logic fits the problem, it has the semblance of a solution. But this is a superficial analysis that non logic can simply be replaced with logic, willy nilly, and voila, it makes you a genius. The world does not truly work that way, nor does science, done carefully and thoroughly through the scientific method, and that's simply applying established psychological principles as a presumed explanation, but done without rigor and a deeper analysis. If you think about what we have been telling you so far, the superstitious notion that bad luck comes in threes is a perfect example of an instilled negative belief to make people expect trouble. What better way to disempower and discourage human beings than to instill such a notion in them? The difficulty and trouble is to be expected and will be inflicted multiple times. We can tell you this is a mind control manipulation campaign done centuries ago throughout humanity, simply as a mean spirited attack on helpless, vulnerable humans only wanting to live their lives and get along. The sources of evil always want to cause harm and will go out of their way to inflict pain through any means available. When they can manipulate your mind, they can make you distracted, forgetful, or even cause an inner disturbance in the body to throw you off balance or interfere with coordination. This can, of course, at the right time, cause an accident with harm to others or the self, as just one example of so called bad luck. So, this well entrenched superstition has a long, long history of harm done to people, and often being repeated at close intervals to flaunt their power and misdirect those punished by making them believe it is bad luck. And one can expect a repeat performance, at least in groups of three. This is the perverse notion behind giving people something to look forward to on the part of psychopaths steeped in evil who are in control of your world.
There's two things going on here. So, somewhere in our lives when we were kids, Carl, somebody told us for the first time about bad luck comes in threes. But when that person told you about that, or you heard it on TV, or you learned it from your uncle or something, there was something going on in your deep subconscious where somebody was sticking in a belief that enabled that statement to ring true for you. And you probably had an inner, aha, I think there's something to that. That's the instilled belief part I think the creator is telling us about here.
Yes, there you go. We've been programmed, in effect, with lots of faulty thinking, false beliefs of all sorts that warp our judgment and make it more likely we're going to be cynical, doubtful, critical of others who think differently than we do because we've been warned, we've been programmed to look with disdain on others with differing perspectives, all sorts of things like this. Look at our politics. It's like a zoo, with the gorillas and the orangutans, fighting. I mean,
A
this.
zoo without fences and cages.
Well, and you long for that because it sort of seems like that's the only thing that might help.
Yeah.
Keep the opponents at least at a respectful distance. They
Yeah,
can.
you got a point.
Otherwise, they'll fling their dung at you, and you'll be sorry.
Chase you up that tree. Oh boy. Oh, we did two. We better do three to keep like the hat trick of the hockey, right? Knock on wood. Papus writes, quote, "This phrase is almost like a verbal talisman designed to ward off bad luck after tempting fate." We are tempting fate with this session, with this show, I think. Breaking that mirror didn't bring me any trouble, knock on wood. The fixation on wood may come from old myths about good spirits and trees, or from an association with the Christian cross. Similar phrases abound in multiple languages, suggesting that the desire not to upset a spiteful universe is very common, unquote. What can Creator tell us about knocking on wood and not upsetting a spiteful universe, Carl?
Well, at least they're recognizing that this is seeking a solution for something. So they're kind of circling around the fact there is an underlying problem here. People are trying to address with the gesture, the
Yeah.
superstitious gesture. So Creator says this is another superstition addressing the perception one is at risk and always under a potential threat. So, at the first sign of trouble and having doubts about one's status from some kind of adverse circumstances, having a ritual to counter that fear of an outside malevolent force provides a kind of self soothing and reassurance, even if it is not logically related to anything in a meaningful way. The attempts to draw an association reaching into the distant past are fitting because this is a superstition with a very long lineage and shows that such a notion will resonate strongly in the culture, being picked up and adopted by a majority of people and will pass it on to their children. We can tell you that strength does not derive from a self prescribed ritual of that kind, but ritual does have a place for reinforcement, for providing focus and marshaling inner intentions for an important desired outcome to come about. This is why ritual is adopted universally by religions, because it is tapping into that ability to enable people to focus their conscious intentions on something lofty. There is a disconnect in people not understanding why they are so powerless because they come from a plane of existence where their conscious thoughts can create things out of energy and make seeming magic happen. So, superstition can be a carryover as a way to compensate for feeling vulnerable and lacking a tangible means to obtain greater power, perceived as being needed to maintain stability and safety. So, once again, it is not that the idea is off target in wanting to not be at risk, but the means to gain assistance are a misguided notion when better tools are needed than a do it yourself ritual that might be comforting to the person, but have no power beyond that to assist them.
That is an interesting idea that we, in a sense, are all rather fresh from the light, because we live relatively short lifespans in comparison to the extraterrestrials. And having been so, fresh from the light, we have a deep subconscious memory. It's not conscious for most people, but we have that feeling that, this idea of being able to fly and having super strength and making things happen almost magically, it seems real in a sense, or like it should be real, right? I know I always had that kind of nag in my deep sub, my back of my mind, like, why is it so easy for us to believe in magic, Carl? It's a good question.
Well, you're circling around the answer, I suspect, that this is a basic property of consciousness to do things that, to our perspective or our way of thinking, is truly magical. because in a physical state like we are as physical beings, we can't make magic happen with our thoughts alone. This is a common sort of new age perception, but we've been cautioned that it's overreaching and a kind of folly of its own. And it's also, guess what? Promoted
Right, right,
by the usual suspects, by the interlopers, because they can laugh at us as we run around trying to manifest things to happen. And it doesn't work that way, just like creators bursting the bubble about knocking on wood.
right.
It's not going to save you.
And that's a good point about the interlopers. We've learned that the Anunnaki can live up to 1,000,000 years based on their technology, and the Arcturians and reptilians up to 500, I think, and the Arcturians up to 1,000. So they're away from the light for a long time, and they're all atheists. So they really do think it's hilarious that we would think we were magical when we clearly aren't, right? And so they would, have fun with that, which they obviously do at our expense. So it's just a fascinating thing to think about, and a bit disturbing too at the same time.
Yes, and they see to the destruction of our most cherished notions.
Yes.
This is why so much of the world is trying to stamp out religion at the current time. Not just because they think it's dangerous. They're being put it put up to it
Yeah.
by the interlopers because they know it's something that will make us unhappy and it will take some joy away and some feeling of comfort and security we derive from it. And that, of course, is because God is real that happens. They see it as a kind of folly and they rub their nose in it
Yeah. Yeah.
and they try and take it away, even as a source of comfort, even though they don't believe it can have real power.
Yeah. Yeah. But at the same time, they're caught, wary of it enough that they don't want to encourage it for sure. And they've seen things happen when people come together in prayer that they can't explain themselves. And so it's an interesting dynamic. U.S. creator, cross your fingers. Pappas writes, quote, those wishing for luck will often cross one finger over another, a gesture that's said to date back to early Christianity. The story goes that two people used to cross index fingers when making a wish, a symbol of support from a friend to a person making the wish. Anything associated with the shape of the Christian cross was thought to bring good luck. The tradition gradually became something people could do on their own. What can Creator tell us about crossing your fingers?
Creator says this is another self created ritual to focus one's intention on a desired outcome and employ a ritual as a reinforcement to make it emphatic and definite. The crossed fingers are also used to take things away, to block them. Children often learn to lie while holding one hand behind their back with their fingers crossed, believing that nullifies the transgression because the crossed fingers nullify the lie itself in some way and negate it. Here again, there is a lack of logic because the lie will be heard by the other party and will have an effect on them. And holding one's fingers crossed will do nothing to correct the misinterpretation. In effect, this act becomes a desire for self protection from the consequences of the lie, because the person will have inner misgivings via their conscience and know they are making a transgression of some kind. And that pang of conscience will motivate them to want to be protected from retribution. So, in effect, having lied to another person, they then lie to themselves, using crossing of the fingers to somehow signal the universe they didn't really mean the lie, with the assumption that can get them off the hook. So, as with all such rituals, it will serve you to look deeper for what is truly taking place, to define the inner need and apply an understanding of what can be done to solve the problem while staying in divine alignment and not using a dodge to avoid personal responsibility or accountability in one's thoughts and actions.
Darn, I guess I can't use this anymore. So
Works
the
for
next
me. So
part of my toolkit is now gone. So it's disappointment. Don't step on a crack. Or break your mother, it'll break your mother's back, right? That's the extension of that. This is from artsandculture.google.com, an article entitled 18 Superstitions from Around the World. Quote, as with mirrors, cracks in the earth, on a sidewalk, or almost anywhere, have long been seen as portals to the realm of the supernatural for both good and ill. To step on those cracks might be to invite or release unwelcome spirits into the world ready to do one harm. Unquote. What can Creator tell us?
All right, Creator says, this is yet another cultural phenomenon providing evidence of the reality of spirit phenomena and the inner fear that awareness generates, and for good reason. People have a long, troubled history with spirit encounters and forces of darkness causing great harm to them, and it has happened again and again all through the ages. Because they are invisible, they do their work in an insidious fashion, and this can create many problems, particularly among disbelievers who will doubt those who can see such things and will begin to mock them and attempt to discredit them. Such campaigns have alternated with an overbelief in the power of Satan and the darkness, and people have mounted witch hunts, killing many innocent people, as well as victims of spirit possession who were believed to be witches, but merely exhibiting signs of spirit possession to make them a target. There are spirit portals, and these represent a danger to the living because the movement of spirits among dimensions is facilitated by a network of such energetic portals, and being in their proximity will guarantee encounters with such beings. And depending on personal vulnerability, will cause much trouble because spirits emerging from such portals are in search of a human target to possess for obtaining their energy to survive. So, this is a deadly business for the dark spirits to find and attach to a human victim. The association of cracks representing spirit portals is a naive assumption, especially because cracks underfoot are vastly outnumbering spirit portals. But there is certainly a valid reason to seek a defense from existing spirit portals and the problems they can bring for humans in the vicinity. What is needed is a divine intervention, as through the Lightworker Healing Protocol, to relocate spirit portals to a safe distance from the vicinity of physical beings.
And we're seeing here how the interlopers can change their minds and their tactics, relatively quickly, in fact. But because it wasn't that long ago that it seems that they were encouraging a belief in Satan and probably doing subconscious programming to encourage and facilitate that. And today they're doing the exact opposite because they want people to be atheists, and you can't believe in Satan and be an atheist. That's as incompatible as believing in Satan and or believing in God and being an atheist. An atheist doesn't believe in anything spiritual in that regard. So it's interesting how they change their tactics based on what their goals are and what the time frame is.
Well, variety is the spice of life.
Yeah.
It's true for other realms and other races of beings, non-human included.
Yeah. Yeah.
They like a good game, but they like a little variety now and then. Yeah, having been at this for hundreds of thousands of years now.
Yeah. 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 They need to find something more productive to do, Carl. I guess that's part of the dilemma, though. You conquer time and space, right? You conquer lifespan. You solve all your problems. You take away labor, and you're sitting around, twiddling your thumbs. What are you going to do for entertainment? Well, we're finding out not good things, right? And especially if
Yes.
you're an atheist, it just
Well, and this has practical value. This isn't just theory. This isn't some esoteric metaphysical phenomenology. I do property clearings for realtors, and I find locations where there is a spirit portal,
sure.
where someone's living in a condo or a single family home or an apartment building. And spirits are streaming through, and it has consequences because the people will be perturbed. They'll often be thrown off track in their lives because they're bombarded with would-be spirit attackers wanting to attach to them and take their energy. And so this is a huge risk factor. It's like living in a very depressed area that's high crime, and
Yeah.
a lot of people who have bad intentions, and you're going to bump into them. Well, this is invisible, but it's real. I'm telling you, it's real. So we clear those properties with the Lightworker healing protocol,
Yeah.
and people can be happier and live better lives.
Well, when my property was first cleared, when I first learned about the protocol, I had intuitive, was able to see things, and was told that there was a spirit portal underneath a carport that's attached to my garage. Who would have thought, right? And but it's moved away to a safe location now. So,
Well, there you go.
you ask Creator, throwing salt over your shoulder. Salt is thought to create a spiritual barrier that evil spirits cannot cross or find difficult to cross. Many magicians and sorcerers use it to create magic circles with the thought that if they stay inside, they'll be protected from the very demons they conjure. What can Creator tell us about the spiritual properties of salt, if any?
Creator says, what we can tell you is there is simply an association of salt with spirit energy, and salt is falsely assumed to confer protective properties and can form a protective barrier around a location to keep a person safe from spirit attack when this is not the case. It is strictly superstition, but again, is reflecting the reality that spirits are a true hazard and menace of significant power. The widespread practice of putting salt at locations, at the borders around a location, as in the four corners of a room of a home, to create a kind of sanctuary, might be self reassuring as a ritual, but that is only a self soothing gesture and not a significant deterrent in any way to spirits and what they can do. They are unaffected by anything in the physical, being in a somewhat higher energetic vibration to begin with. So, what is needed is a better tool, in fact, divine intervention, to deal with dark spirits and the risks they represent to the living, and not a superstitious notion that, once again, is based on an intuitive awareness. There is some truth behind the ritual, and that is why it is adopted so widely and has stood the test of time down through the ages. Unfortunately, the level of ignorance has prevented advancing beyond a kind of primitive acceptance of folklore as being all one needs to live their life with safety and security when it is a hollow promise and a misdirection in the bargain. The whole notion got started as a lie to disempower humans and keep them vulnerable to spirit manipulation.
Well, it does beg the question, because salt has got a huge importance in metaphysical, magical circles. It's a main ingredient. There's a lot of literature on it, and I have to wonder the same thing about like incense, for instance, and even like burning sage. These are common practices too, and I'm wondering if they basically have the same effect as salt. But maybe you could ask
Well, I
Creator
can tell
sometime.
you that's true. It is worthless as a defense or to clear a location of spirits hanging about. They will not be affected in any way because it's a physical phenomenon. The smoke from smudging
Right.
with sage, burning it in a room to it will be unpleasant to the people
Right.
living in that location, which is kind of an inside joke. You see, well,
Yeah.
let's get him to make the house smoky as though that can protect them, and tell them it will.
Right. Well, they're
And
joking to death on it.
yeah,
you
and
know,
they'll be kind
I
of
mean,
poisoning themselves, if only in a small way, with the supposed protective solution.
oh, and we're very respectful of religions. We really are. But I was taken to an Orthodox ceremony once, and the amount of incense they used was just unbelievable. My eyes were burning, Carl. So there's something to be said for what you're sharing here. I think choking in the church. Oh boy. You ask Creator, superstitions may seem silly and innocuous at first glance, but some people worry about them a great deal. Some to the point of having genuine panic attacks if they discover they violated one. How does someone get into this state? Does subconscious mind control contribute? What can Creator tell us?
Creator says, here you are getting to the heart of the matter, that all these superstitions exist for good reason. They are all reacting to something that is actually real, whether or not it is a problem in the moment in a way a person is fearing and seeking a ritual of protection or a way of avoiding an encounter with an imagined evil that could, in fact, be lurking. Because people vary in sensitivity, those who tend to be fearful, and particularly if they have a past history of having difficulty with unseen manipulations and people acting on dark intentions to stalk and attack them, for example, will be highly sensitive to any idea of an unseen force that might be lurking about. And this will create a state of chronic anxiety in some individuals. When it rises to the level of panic attacks, what is going on is that deeper levels of the mind are replaying past episodes of tragedy at the hands of that darkness or other humans acting at the behest of dark forces. And that is perceived intuitively to be a factor. This ramp up within of fear of dark forces can become incapacitating at an extreme in vulnerable individuals who have no other way to cope with such inner feelings. This will also be ramped up if there are dark spirits possessing a person because they can talk to the deep subconscious mind of their host and wage a campaign of terror, threatening and mocking and warning of impending doom, attacks that will be launched, and savagery that the person will be subjected to. While not understood on a conscious level, the anxiety generated by the inner conflict of the deep subconscious mind will trigger anxiety because it is linked to the emotions. This is why people with high anxiety often have no logical reason for their state of mind, and why it is so readily assumed to be merely a chemical imbalance within the brain. Given there is no obvious logical explanation, a therapist might ferret out. That does not mean therapists will not try to help a person find an explanation for their dilemma, and there may well be a superficial unearthing of difficulties that are then blamed for the chronic anxiety, even wrongly. The dream state is another arena where people can be manipulated and terrorized through recalling times of torture and savagery in other lifetimes at the hands of the darkness, and spirits will ramp that up all day long to keep the deep part of the mind terrorized with thoughts of impending assault and doom. That is enough to throw anyone off stride and make them miserable. What is needed is a divine intervention to remove the spirit attachments and to assist with repair of the karmic history and its impact still being projected because the wounds of the past were never healed. And so their Akashic records will hold many repositories of negative emotion linked to trauma events of all kinds. And those will circle back around to the person via the law of karma to be reminders of the healing need, but in effect present a new injury that will often not be addressed meaningfully by caregivers who do not understand where such things truly come from. In effect, much of the practice of psychotherapy is the creation of a series of rituals to help people cope with the unseen, but not unfelt sources of evil.
I'm reminded that just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean they're really not out to get me, right? And people that would have panic attacks, if they violate a superstition, creator is saying here that they feel the unseen forces, and maybe they're feeling particularly paranoid because they have this kind of karmic dilemma going on where bad things happen to them seemingly without invite, and they're panicking ahead of time. Essentially, they kind of feel that impending doom, and that can be a difficult dilemma to get yourself out of. And that's where the light work healing protocol comes in, Carl.
Well, we need a ritual, we need a superstitious solution. So we'll take a pill
Right.
for our fear, and that chemical will be the magic talisman that will transform our brain and save us. Knock on wood, too. We can't hurt.
Can't hurt.
The pill might, though. This is the problem. it,
Yeah.
it could be
Yeah.
dangerous, and so there's a lot of misguided notion. This is a rather shocking and damning indictment of the practice of therapies of various sorts by the psychological community, that it becomes at some point more a kind of ritual than a reality in
Right.
trying to cope with what is really unappreciated still and how things get going.
Yeah. Yeah. Think only positive thoughts, Carl. That's kind of a ritual in its own right. Oh, you ask creator. A great many superstitions seem to revolve around an obsession with evil and warding it off, especially. Can creator share with us how empowered prayer and the Lightworker healing protocol will do more to protect you and your loved ones than slavish adherence to time worn superstitions, even and especially if there is something to them?
All right, Creator says, the tools of the divine revealed through your channel in his scholarly study and persistent striving to learn the truth of things, the origins of problems of all kinds, mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, have culminated in teachings about empowered prayer as a ready way for anyone to enlist the help of the divine for daily needs, many of which can be influenced by dark forces to complicate things and create hazards. The deep origins of misguided beliefs can be reversed through a divine intervention arranged by the Lightworker healing protocol, which includes a very powerful healing request that will work across timelines to deal with the origins of inner negative beliefs and missing soul attributes resulting from episodes of trauma and the pain and suffering they caused, as well as personal transgression in becoming a perpetrator at times. That the law of karma will bring back around to you and cause a disruption of your life that will lead to trouble, inner conflict, and a disruption of things in your dealings with others. All of these dynamics are not immediately understandable to the conscious level of the mind because it is disconnected from deep below and has no awareness of other lifetimes and their ongoing influence on the present. Nor does it see, in most cases, the workings of dark spirits manipulating a person from deep within or affecting people around them to make them difficult, hostile, and a danger. There are many road hazards in life. A self prescribed ritual that is a kind of superstition will not save you. What is needed to deal with negativity of all kinds, including outside sources of consciousness that can impinge on you and threaten you directly, is a divine intervention to restore, replenish, replace, and refine what has been damaged or thrown in disarray by the difficulties of life. That will strengthen you and make you invulnerable to outside manipulation. But you need to be protected from harm in order to regain your equilibrium and rise to a higher state of vibration that will be self protective. This, the Lightworker Healing Protocol, is designed to do because it addresses all sources of negativity from within or without and is comprehensive in addressing virtually any kind of need and its root causes. As such, it can work across timelines, even to go into your history and begin to change the karmic consequences of past trauma, to remove the karmic imperative for you to revisit old challenges again and again, perhaps. If this includes vulnerability to dark spirits, which has been commonplace throughout history, this will set you up for a nightmarish existence, potentially, if you have no way to cope with the savagery of these evil entities working to harm you. If they get a toehold and work their way into your energy field, you will not be able to dislodge them on your own, and nor will anyone else. Only through working with the divine in partnership can such dark doings be reckoned with effectively and people restored to their former well being. This is true for all kinds of adversity, whether chronic illness, a mental or emotional impairment, or a state of inadequacy in coping with life, building strong bonds of love with others, and other personal shortcomings. Those happen through becoming impaired through faulty thinking that is self destructive, and especially through harm imposed by outside beings, physical or in spirit form. It is through the divine that you can be guided, supported, healed, and protected if you know how to ask for the right things and in the right way to provide instructions for the divine in what is needed. Without any knowledge or specificity to understand your dilemma, an appeal for help gives little for the divine to work with as fuel to save you. This is why getting outside help from a practitioner of the Lightworker Healing Protocol can truly save the day, because many need an outside advocate because they lack an adequate belief in the divine or in themselves from being beaten down by life and becoming so negative they cannot support their own healing energetically in giving the divine realm enough energy to work with. Everyone has baggage gained from prior trauma. There is always an intention to work on this with each new incarnation. If not addressed, the damage will remain for the next life to deal with, compounded by anything happening in the interim to add fuel to the fire from further wounding that will happen inevitably in the course of a lifetime. This cycle must stop in order for humanity to progress or even continue its existence. The sooner people begin to work in earnest on these problems in ways that will truly work and are not a makeshift ritual of some kind that is well intended but lacks power to truly change things, the sooner the world will improve and help you get out from under the adversity. Because this is what is needed to solve the problem of evil once and for all. It is human responsibility to see to this, and that is the knowledge that has been missing.
But missing no more. Be sure to download the ebook on the Lightworker Healing Protocol, getwisdom.com/LHP, as well as the ebook on empowered prayer, getwisdom.com/prayer. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode, Carl. Thanks a lot.
All right, be well.